This week on The Droids, you can call us all believers because we're talking about The Mandalorian Chapter 15, The Believer. We got our good buddy Bill Burr back in the mix, and we've got a lot to say this week on The Droids. Welcome back to The Droids You're Looking For, a Star Wars podcast alongside Chris, Ryan, and Sam. I am Mike. Got the whole crew here for you once again. Sam and I are back after missing last week. There's a lot to talk about from this edition, but I do want to say before we get into it, Sam, as briefly as we can, I think you and I just have to at least give some thoughts on the return of Boba Fett last week. And I want to say, I guess, Ryan, Chris, will you indulge us both for a moment here?
Well, I don't know if you know, but Christian Harloff refused to record anything this week until he heard your thoughts. He did a big stink about it. So I'd say you better.
I will say I was in pretty much total agreement with both of you. The thing that I didn't feel like, or I wanted to say while I was listening to the episode was, The Mandalorian is Boba Fett. Like, you didn't need to
Right.
bring back the character. He's literally exactly the same. The only reason he didn't call him Boba Fett from the very beginning was because Boba Fett died in Return of the Jedi. So you bring him back, you get him to do some violence indulgence like they did, and okay, that's fine. I'm not hating it. There's a lot that I just like about the iconography of him, and that was enjoyable, but I just thought it was kind of hysterical. I'm like, why do you need this character back in this when you literally just created Boba Fett again? And I think, as maybe it was Chris who said it in the podcast last week, I feel like they are going to just result in Mando having Slave One when Boba Fett meets his demise, probably in the finale a week from now. Now that the Razor Crest is gone. And I couldn't agree more with you, Ryan, that I felt like I'm concerned about the future of Star Wars after that episode. Which way are we going? The Favreau JJ way and not the Filoni way? I don't know that I felt like things were maybe as dire. I feel like we're now going to have parallels because, as we all found out in this new announcement from Disney, which just happened this week, which we will have a whole episode about the now 10 series on Disney Plus of Star Wars. Count them, 10. I'm floored by that number. We'll talk about that in an entire episode. But Ryan, I think they're going to do both. I think they're going to say we've got this one for the violent, crazy action-adventure Favreau type, and we've got Filoni running this one, and that's where I feel like we're going to be. And that's my biggest brief summary. I loved all the stuff with Baby Yoda up on the hill. I found it ridiculous the way they tried to set up plot devices to keep Mando from being able to go chase him. But I didn't like the episode, but I had fun in the episode. I'm never going to be complaining, it seems like, about a Mando episode, except for the one with Kana Valley. I just think that they were limited in what they did here, and at times I'm like, I don't enjoy the action, and then other times I'm like, hey, there's still a 13-year-old in me who's eating that up. And that's what I got, Sam.
I mean, you guys have, there's not a ton to say that you guys haven't. I thought it was, from a plotting standpoint, this was like, I think one of the weakest episodes of the whole series. Like from like, it was just contrived and clumsy and so convenient. You guys have hit on that with getting Mando kind of out of the way.
Man watches child sit on rock.
I didn't like the number of ways that they. It was just contrived that he couldn't protect him, that he couldn't get to him, and they needed a way.
He tried to reach in with his left hand. He tried to reach in with his right hand.
They really. I don't know. That was all weak. I also thought that, Ryan, you were the one who said, and this was actually one of my notes, that I was going to bring up, was I
Sounds
can't
like I have
believe
some fans on this podcast.
how dated Robert Rodriguez's direction of action feels. I mean, it screamed, like, I was like, is there like a POD soundtrack to this episode to go with it? It felt so late 90s, mid 90s, honestly.
You could tell the juxtaposition between that episode and this current episode.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we'll get into the current episode. The thing that I just like, this season we're 7 episodes in, and 2 episodes for me have just stood out as like remarkably atonal, and it's the first episode and the Boba Fett, episode what are we up? Chapter 14, right? Like the Boba Fett episode. They felt like they didn't feel like Star Wars to me. They didn't feel like they were part of the same series we've been watching. They felt extremely indulgent. They felt like, there was a clear view of like, this is the Western of Star Wars. That's what Favreau's interested in, who wrote both episodes and directed one of them. That's what Rodriguez is clearly interested in.
Cowboys and aliens, baby.
And so it just, it from those angles didn't work. Now, what I'll say, though, is like Mike, I had a fun time watching it. Something that did work for me was I kind of disagree with everybody about, I like the way they brought Boba Fett back. I didn't need it. I agree that it wasn't necessary, but I think if you're going to nod and bring back characters from the original trilogy or legacy characters, Boba Fett is the one to do it with. He's so underdeveloped in the original trilogy. He is like iconographic and has like a great look and some mystique and mystery about him. We don't know what happened before, and he's one of those guys that you can say like, hey, he died but we never saw the body. Let's Terminator to him. Let's bring him back. Let's make him a hero. Let's have some fun with it. Let's bring in an actor who, played the father on which he was cloned. I think it's cool for Tamura Morrison to be back. There was a really interesting piece in the New York Times where he talked about like the fun he had with the role. So I liked the way that they like kind of retcon Django and therefore Boba into being Mandalorians as foundlings, which then strengthens Din's story going forward. It gives Din another compass on which to, he's getting so many influences. This season, as like the season of guest stars, is like bringing in different perspectives for Din to map his own growth to. And I think that's interesting. I think that worked. I thought some of the dialogue was actually decent. I thought like the like line of like, does this look Jedi to you, was funny. Like that joke played for me. But like overall, I don't know that I'll ever watch the episode again. I think it's weird that people are so amped on like the action of seeing Boba Fett like quote unquote kick ass, because I thought the action was like far and away the weakest we've seen. So I don't know. I had fun. I'll never watch it again. I had way more fun this week.
Sam, you're right, though. I mean, Boba Fett was always an underdeveloped character, and I'm glad that we've really gotten a glimpse into his interiority now. He was a guy that was just a suit of armor, and now he's a guy who lost his suit of armor and now has it back. Thank God.
We got it.
Well, I think there. I don't know. I mean, I get you're making a joke, but I did like the story we got of him, and he's developed more in Clone Wars.
Story?
And he's given us.
We don't have to get into it.
Sam, I don't know this is what you were going for, but when you talked about it being some sort of 90s, not only from Robert Rodriguez, but the music that would be playing, as I just kept on thinking that like the first moment that Boba Fett hit a stormtrooper and shattered the helmet is it should have been like, keep them separated.
That'd be
just
good.
go into the whole
or like
thing.
just go like, ow,
yeah.
Did you guys hear the Wonder Woman theme when he showed up?
Man, they really had to stick with that one, huh?
It felt like
they were like, that's the theme. I bet it's not in the new one.
It also was, it felt like a 4-3 television show.
Yeah,
it did.
Was,
Chris,
was,
you mentioned it feeling like Star Trek or like a sci-fi show.
Yeah.
It 100%. Like shooting.
I was waiting for
shooting
Rita
in California
Repulsa to show up in the desert.
Right.
But I just think there's something that's always cooler about the guy who always seems like you don't want to mess with. He's standing in the corner the whole time, looking awesome, and he never does anything. And then when you find out that he does something, and it's kind of like, well, I guess that's cool. I like when he took down the two ships accidentally with the rocket.
That was
the
kind of
side
the slow,
shot. Yeah, like the no look shot that he ends his like, I don't know, like murking of all the stormtroopers with, where he like just shoots to the side without turning his head, is like far and away the stupidest thing I've ever seen in Star Wars. It's so dumb. It's like,
John, so the script is only 19 pages. You only have him hitting 4 stormtroopers with his staff. I was thinking maybe he could hit 10 stormtroopers with his staff. That'll get us to time, right?
It's a very maximalist approach to like what you consider action. And it's just, again, it's like what this person considers badass. I think, look, if we want to take a silver lining, it's like this was 1,000% Robert Rodriguez making something in the Star Wars universe. And so it means that, like, the directors have some level of autonomy. Now, I think that, like, weakened this season of the show and the storytelling, but it's like, hey, get me a more interesting director, and I'm going to be excited about that level of freedom, you know?
Which brings us to this week.
We did have a more interesting director.
Hell yeah. And writer.
And
Yes.
Big deal.
Well,
Yeah.
let's talk about The Believer and the penultimate episode of season 2. We are almost done. Next week, we leave the realm of The Mandalorian for almost an entire year.
And
just
we've
about an
seen-
entire year, because
and we've
season 3 is
seen
not supposed to premiere till December next year.
And we've seen every episode, like every director that's been announced. So whoever's directing the finale is either one of the people we've already seen and hasn't been announced, or like is going to be a surprise person.
I think it's Favreau, because I thought they announced the order of the directing, but maybe.
I'm
Boy.
just upset. I forgot that this season was only 8 episodes, and I think it was last week I realized that, there's only 2 more left.
Yeah.
So
It's really amazing that they crammed 5 episodes worth of material into 8 episodes.
That's for sure.
second consecutive year.
I think that was worse than season 1 for me personally.
But Disney Investor Day did seem to reveal that the Cassian Andor series will be 13 episodes, which is exciting to hear that there's going to be a bit more of some of the other series. Again,
Can't
we're
wait
going to
to
get
see.
into all of that in another podcast where we talk about everything that we learned about Star Wars, and we'll mention some of the other things that are going on Disney Plus as well. But there is a plethora of content on the way. Of course, rate and review us on iTunes. Follow us on Twitter, Droids Pod, Facebook, Droids Pod, Instagram, Droids Pod, and YouTube, the Droids Pod playthrough. Got to see it. Fall in order. Don't miss it. TikTok, Droids Pod. There hasn't been anything posted. I apologize if you checked it out. I'm going to get to it. I promise. But let's get into this. And Sam and I have kind of just gone through our last thoughts of the last episode. So, Ryan and Chris, why don't you give us your first takeaways from The Believer?
Well, I liked it more than last week's episode. I had some issues with it. We were talking about this on a text chain, and I'm going to reveal my thoughts right here on the podcast. And I'll get into this more. I've been critical of Bill Burr. I think what he did here was great.
Wow.
I'm not saying that unqualified, but
Yeah,
he was great in this
I agree
episode,
with
and
you.
I'll defend that position.
I agree with you.
I think
Yeah.
he was good in this
Mando?
episode.
You guys like a Mando? I used to be a shooter. I used to be a shooter around here.
I think you locked on his impression, so now you're like, he's not that bad.
Yeah,
Stick around.
I got to do more of this.
Hey, I don't like him as a persona very much, Bill Burr, in
Right.
the world. I think he's a problematic comedian, but I will admit this, and I've felt this way about his performances in other things, and I know last week I made fun of how distracting he is, and I think that is true. However, he does have this very interesting pathos about him as an actor, and I think that, like, in other things I've seen him in, like King of Staten Island specifically, which isn't a movie I really liked, but I liked him in it, there is, like, a pathos to him that I think is very engaging.
Yeah.
That being said, yeah. So, like, that's just, like, one thing. I think that he completely understands the assignment that he's given, and he executes it beautifully, while at the same time having no business being in the Star Wars world.
Right. I mean, I think it's good to have that kind of character in Star Wars, though. Like, I think the character overall, I think it's, like, it's rarer to have that kind of thing now, I guess. I don't know. It's good to have that juxtaposition. I don't know if it's good or bad,
like,
but it's, like, good to have something.
He's a good guy to have, like, explaining.
Right.
Like, they use, like, kind of his like, annoying Joe Rogan-ness to have him, like, explain several
Right, yeah,
philosophies and why they're all meaningless.
Exactly.
And then,
his curmudgeonness is, like, used as a kind of a pry.
yeah, and then I think that his emotional turn in the episode, he actually plays beautifully.
Right.
But that's, you know, and then I think that I think it's a really well shot episode. I think the action still has some weird pacing problems. There were like one too many waves of those pirates.
Yeah, a
That
little
keeps,
bit.
And then
keeps happening in this
it
series.
just keeps coming. Like, I'm just like, why do you do this? Like, it's gonna be 30 minutes. Leave it alone.
Yeah.
I felt like they started shooting it too far down that road, and they're like, well, we got another 3 miles to cover. It's like, you're designing the road.
I think last week's episode must have been too quiet because they really turned up the volume in this one, and There's a moment in the middle that, as we get deeper into it, I want to hear everyone else's thoughts that I really, really had an issue with.
Okay.
But we'll get into that as we kind of go through it more. Christopher?
I enjoyed this episode. I think it was a good, like, just return to the form of the series. Like, they weren't playing on any, like, I love the Ahsoka episode, absolutely, but I think, like, it kind of pulls you out just a little bit, which is fine, which is great. It's an exciting moment, but I think, like, we hadn't just got back to the middling, so I was happy to get back to that before the finale. I agree on your sentiments with Bill Burr here. I think he's not a bad actor. I think he's a good fit for the role. I think it's kind of fun. They're definitely, like, now that we know there's going to be these kind of side series, they're definitely just kind of like pinning people together, giving everyone looks, so that Cara Dune can take a ragtag group and make the Rangers. Is what
Please don't.
Kind of what it's kind of what I think.
There's
is
a lot
happening.
of branches growing off the tree.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. They're setting up a lot of they're giving themselves a lot of different pivot points. I really, really like. I like Migs Mayfeld a lot. I think her character's fine, but I think it's just I'm happy to see her in the episode.
She's a very compelling performer.
Yes.
Yeah.
This episode had one of my favorite Star Wars moments, though, and
Whoa.
It's similar to one of my favorite moments in Revenge of the Sith, and that's the classic Palpatine yeet. There was a shot. Everything, like, some of the shots in this episode just like went like 5 to 10 seconds too long, but they were like looking for filler.
5 to 10 seconds.
Yeah,
So
and there's a reaction from Cara Dune. It's like something like nice shooting, and then like they cut to her, and she's like, she pauses and then just goes, yeah.
I love that you realized we were on a podcast and you were doing it.
Yes.
But you realized that pausing was silence.
Yes, exactly. I hit the mute button.
I think I remember that moment, Chris, because I was like, oh, they must be waiting for an attack from the Imperials. They're going to find them up there on that ridge because they know where the shots were coming from. And nope, just cut away.
Yeah, there was nothing.
I thought this episode, when you're talking about like Ming-Na Wen as like Fennec Shand, it did annoy me that I was like just have her. We don't need Cara Dune. Like, we needed her to get Bill Burr, I guess, but then like to have them both be snipers was annoying to me. You know,
it was kind of
also
funny.
You didn't really need her to get Bill Burr. I would have bought it if the Mandalorian just showed up.
Yeah, I liked also that just like all of a sudden everyone has sniper rifles and everyone's using scopes to look at stuff. I think after two sniper scopes, and it gets a little silly. Like if everyone's like, "Here, grab your scopes, let's all take a look."
But if everyone has a sniper scope, then no one does.
Yeah.
I appreciated the writing that they came back at the end and he did take out what is it? Rubidium, not coaxium. Like, can we just pick an energy source and stick with it? What was this one?
Well, Mike, that's what
I
we need to
I
do.
think you hit it, Mike. It was close enough.
Rubidium? I don't know. Anyway, I appreciated that it felt like, I was like, oh, if this is Favreau written, they're not going to really pay off that he also needs to take out that before leaving. They set it up, obviously, earlier in the episode with the officer saying that they're going to take out and kill more people with the energy you just delivered. But I was just, for whatever reason, I was like, oh, I don't know if Favreau will clean that up because I didn't know who wrote this episode ahead of time. I'm like, okay, that was a nice moment, and I like that the scope came out for that.
Yeah, I did like that. It's a good
It was a good shot, right? You see that?
Right.
You see that with the shot? Good shot.
They got these rifles.
Let's get in the cab, this spaceship. That's my Bill Burr.
They were really
Ryan, you talked about like. Go ahead, Chris.
Speaking of pauses, they were really pushing the big reveal in this episode. The mask. Mando takes his mask off. We didn't bring that
The
up.
reveal that we had last season too.
Well,
I think it was done really well here, and I think when
Here
you're
was
talking
more
about
like applicable.
when you're talking about like,
Chris, let Sam talk.
oh my god, when you're talking about Bill Burr and like his pathos, I think that's like part
You
of
want
why
to hear my Bill Burr impression?
I don't. The like part of why he like worked better in this episode specifically, as opposed to like last season for me, is like in this season he's low status, right? He's put like correctly, I think, for him to like work as an actor, he's put in a position of being like the guy who not only is low status, but like recognizes it and knows he's kind of like, he's scared, he's in trouble, he's outmatched and stuff. And I also think he benefited by, clearly he actually had like real scenes with Pedro Pascal, and Rick Famuyiwa, who's a good director, I think got like better work from him than, I mean, I guess Rick did the previous season episode with him too. But I felt it worked better this time. And like having Pedro Pascal, that moment where like after all the jibes and all the teasing, where his character Mayfeld like kind of says like, forget about it, the mask never came off, I never saw you. For me, that was like the more touching moment. I actually, I thought he kind of overplayed the PTSD, like I'm going to kill this guy. But I also, it's very gratifying to see that guy get shot, who I think was Joe Chill from Batman Begins. I think
correct.
that actor. Was it really?
I was trying to figure out who that guy was.
I got it in.
Well,
I
I will
was
say
trying to
this,
figure
Sam.
out who that guy
That's
was.
wild.
I didn't
Sam,
look that up. I picked that. I like figured that out on my own.
Sam, I'm so confident I haven't looked that up. I'm just positive it's the guy.
Oh boy!
Oh boy! All right, I'm going to look it up now.
I'm truly sorry for what I did.
That's
I can't take back what I did.
It was insane.
That performance was
I-
insane.
The
It was.
like
It
The
absolutely
Imperial
was.
General he was
The
playing.
Imperial
that
guy.
was
He
an
was so
insane
good.
Yeah.
performance.
I
don't
it
know
was
where I
wild.
fall on it yet.
Oh, I thought it was great. I loved it.
like it was so just like out of nowhere. I did not expect that person to speak like that, to like have that kind of conversation, or their little drink session they had. They really played up the fact that Bill Burr did not like to wear his mask, and so it just became an issue
that seems on
later
brand.
on, where they're like, "Well, just put your mask on, and walk into that room." Like
he clearly
he
left
didn't like
it in
so
the
much he left it truck.
Yeah, it was so dumb.
Yeah, that dude playing the general was so skinny, and I was like, was he saving room for all the scenery he was going to be chewing?
Oh, boy.
Oh, I thought he was great.
I honestly don't know where I fall on it, because he was playing him as so, like, evil, which of course he should. He's an Imperial general, but, like, I'm used to seeing the Imperial generals be evil and British.
Yeah.
And he was evil, like, from, Alabama.
Fair.
Mm-hmm. I am still thrown off by American accented stormtroopers.
I was like, we have to buy his accent and Bill Burr's accent in the same scene. It was just like a little too much.
Yeah, right. Yeah. What world? In what world?
Like, was Din Djarin just like, where are these guys from?
Maybe.
Well,
maybe
they did. Where are you from, Brown Eyes?
Maybe
Someone
he
literally,
served
like-
with Bosch.
Yeah.
Maybe
He
they
literally
came
says
up-
Alderaan.
you mean
like, he literally is like, one's from Tatooine, one's from Alderaan. Like, it was nuts.
that one scene where he says, "You fought in the Bosch Wars"?
Apparently, that was a reference. The operation they name drop apparently is like a reference to one of the games. I think.
I have no doubt.
I forget what it was called. It was like Crimson. No, not Crimson. That's the. Ugh, I'll have to look it up.
Did
Anyway, I
anybody
think it
else-
was a reference.
Oh, were you thinking of Crimson Dawn from Solo: A Star Wars Story, Sam? One of your favorite pieces of work of all time?
Yeah, that was
Crimson
what
Dawn?
I was thinking of.
The
I was
Crime
thinking of-
Syndicate?
I was
Crimson
thinking
Dawn?
of Crimson Dawn. my
Hashtag make
favorite
Alden
Star
Star Wars.
Operation Cinder. I'm looking it up. Operation Cinder. It's from Battlefront 2.
Oh.
Oh,
really?
That's cool.
Is it Is that like in the campaign or just in the online portion of it?
You know, when it's that scene in Star Wars where a bunch of teenagers swear at each other and fight.
I think it's a
fight
turning point in
online.
Battlefront 2 where you're ordered to do something heinous and your character's like, no, I won't do it.
Okay.
So
Did
it's
anyone
like
else-
it is like it does, and Mayfeld talks about how there was like he says tough decisions were made that day that kind of like is what is alluded to, that some kind of like heinous war crime happened.
Did anyone else get vibes of Inglourious Bastards and the basement pub scene?
Yes,
Yeah,
Sure.
it was. Yeah, definitely.
I was thinking of the milk scene.
Yeah. I mean, this scene wasn't an hour and a half long like that tavern scene in Inglourious Bastards, so that was different. But
Yeah, I can sit in that scene for an hour and a half. I enjoyed it very much so.
yeah, that's a good movie.
I was gonna shifting gears back a little earlier, Ryan. I agree that the other thing I was going to talk about on this was like I agree that there was like too many waves of pirates, but just again as like a highlight, I thought the action in this episode was much better, both at the beginning and at the end. I thought like the fighting, like the rooftop fighting, I was like, this both looks like Star Wars and also is kind of doing something new in Star Wars with like kind of straight up fisticuffs. And I was just like, you know, everybody's kind of making hay of like Robert Rodriguez, action director, you know, Desperado, like, you know, the guy who, and I'm like, this action was so much better shot and like believable. And I love that, like, kind of how weary Din was looking by the end of it. You know, it's like he got hurt, he got beat, you know, a little bit, but like,
there's that
he was
wonderful
willing
moment
to fight him off.
There's that wonderful moment where he uses his shoulder pad to stop something, kind of instinctually, because he's used to having Beskar, and it shatters. It shatters,
and like he gets into the cab, and he's like breathing heavy, and his arm hurts because he didn't have his Beskar armor. He like forgot. Yeah, like Stormtrooper armor sucks.
That was cool.
Speaking of that pirate scene, so this is where I really took issue with how a moment was portrayed in this, and it's when like the quote unquote like rescue comes with the TIE fighters.
Yeah.
So it's played, and like with the music and everything, like literally the way it's played to us is this like triumphant moment. And I didn't feel like there was enough weight given to the idea of like the terribleness of what was actually happening, which is that the Empire was coming in and kind of occupying this. Bill Burr's character even says, he's like, the New Republic, the Empire, like, we're just on their land. Like, we're just taking something away. And then literally you have to assume that the pirates are kind of like locals who are, you know, like kind of put into desperation to kind of take over these Imperial convoys. And then they're literally slaughtered by these like occupiers. And it's played with the music and everything like this winning moment. And I understand that like we can bring our own kind of tension to it. But it really didn't sit right with me, the way it was played.
I agree with you, Ryan, but I also think that they should have just left out showing the townspeople, because I don't think that they meant for the pirates to be connected to the townspeople. Logically, it makes much more sense that those pirates would be trying to take them out, but they didn't have anything that looked similar. They were also a completely different species than the townspeople. There were none of those species in the townspeople. It doesn't really change the way what you're talking about. It still felt really kind of off. But
I'm reading the text as it's there, you know. And it's like that was,
and I think they didn't execute that well, because they should have just picked a lane on that. They should have been like, well, we're either going total pirates and not paying any attention to the townspeople, or the townspeople have a band of, you know, mercenary fighters, you know, trying to save them. Because it just
don't play this like huge triumphant like score.
I mean, the only thing that they were doing it in that way was like, oh, wow, we only care about our characters, so the fact that they survived is wonderful. Let's not pay attention to also the mass murder that takes place.
Yeah, I just thought it was so strange, especially after they just had taken such like time for Bill Burr to like, you know, say like these different philosophies and stuff. I was like, okay, like if they're doing that, like why wouldn't they then show that kind of dichotomy or in action, you know?
I felt like it was there though. So I'd have to go back and rewatch, because I didn't actually clock. I did clock the music at a different point where I really liked the music of the episode.
Sam, you said you wouldn't rewatch this episode.
No, I said I wouldn't rewatch the last one.
But that was a promise, Sam.
But
you better not.
Yeah.
But so I didn't clock the music, but what I do think the fact that they do show after the flyover of the TIE fighters, the fact that they show the stormtroopers like slaughtering the guys as they run up and like just blowing them all away, and they linger on that shot, and then the immediate following is like all these Imperials, you know, celebrating Din and Mayfield's like successful delivery and their discomfort with it. I thought it kind of did the job of being like, isn't this gross that we're celebrating the you know, the Empire being, you know, the saviors of our heroes? Like this should sit unwell, and it did for me. It didn't dive into like the equal mistreatment by both the New Republic and the Empire maybe enough, but the New Republic wasn't really a factor in this episode, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
guess
just another
I
perspective.
gathered by the end of that, I realized who the good guys actually were because of the music, and I understand now.
Can I ask, has anybody else ever seen an Imperial officer or stormtrooper salute like they're part of the U.S. military before this episode?
I don't think so.
It was
All I
really
can-
weird.
All I can picture
me.
is the Spaceballs salute.
Well, yeah. But it felt like,
It doesn't
where
make
did
sense
that
with their
come from?
helmets. You know, it doesn't like lend itself with the helmets.
No. It felt totally off. It felt not Star Wars to me.
Yeah, that was odd. It was odd.
Also,
That's the American stormtroopers.
Yeah, that's why that's what they're doing to it.
Right. That's the American battalion. I will say, just in that we got our first glimpse of actual Pedro Pascal this season, you know, he had very few lines, especially with the helmet off, right? So, you know, the work when he was showing his face was limited, but I will say, I felt like he really brought it in such a again, almost for it being his show, for him being the lead, it's almost a cameo when he actually shows up like on screen. But I felt like he brought such like he was so naked without his armor. He was so uncomfortable and scared when that Imperial officer talked to him and he froze and he didn't know what to do. We saw him, you know, at such a disadvantage and it's such a different look than normally when he's shielded in his Beskar, and that Bill Burr had to come in and kind of like, you know, quick, you know, fast talk to try and save him. Obviously, you know, Bill Burr's whole thing is like, make me the fast talker. But like for me, it really, really warmed me to Din's character, and it informed just how desperate he is to get Grogu back, which of course we know. Of course, like, we're with him on that journey. That's the whole thing that's happening right now. But I just think that, like, props to Pedro Pascal for coming into, you know, his day of shooting this season.
Yeah.
But, you know, and he does a great vocal performance every week, so I don't want to, like, undercut the fact that he's not the man in the suit all the time or often. But I just thought he was so good. I just wanted to, like, see if you guys felt that as well. I thought he was so good in such a small like scene that it worked really well for me.
I felt the same, Sam. Like all the things that you described, I don't really feel like I have a whole lot to add to it because it just his discomfort. You know, I did want a little bit more matted hair. I just felt like, hey, you're really handsome, but the helmet's going to make you look a little worse than it came out.
Yeah, you've been wearing a helmet for 36 years. You're going to have some hat.
Yeah, I just thought that could
have like weird, he should have like weird ingrown hairs and acne.
Oh,
like,
his hair shouldn't even be like it should on top. It shouldn't even be growing because it's been shaved away.
Right.
No, but I
Should
thought
have
he
a
was
good
great.
layer of helmet grease in there too.
Yeah,
Who cuts his hair?
he does when he is asleep or, you know, at the end of the day when no one's around.
He cuts
he
it.
I
does
in.
assume it's a feature of the helmet.
Oh, that'd be fun.
But Sam, I agree with you. It made me want more like that, and I wonder if this episode is sort of the start of us seeing a lot more of him without the helmet on. I think that considering the moment and considering the build-up, they could have done a little bit better job before he took it off. You know, I maybe I need to rewatch that part again because it just felt like this is such a significant moment for the character that it matters so much to him. And we knew it mattered so much to him, as you said, to get back Grogu. But it felt like there could have been, I don't know, another 15 seconds of contemplation, something. I know they didn't have a lot of time, but something for him to just be like, is he going to do this? Is he not going to do this? Like, I just felt like that could have been done a little bit better. I don't know that I have a way they could have, but it just felt like I didn't get the momentous aspect of that in the first viewing, and maybe I will when I revisit it, but it just felt like that could have been a little bit more important than it was. And it was, once he took it off, it was exactly the way it should be. But just like that moment before he took it off.
Yeah, I agree with you. I thought maybe they were playing it like it's like, oh, he's not hesitating anymore.
That's fair.
You know, like but I agree with you that it didn't feel like the moment it should have been, especially if they've been building up to that again.
Yeah.
You know, if it's like once a season he's going to take his helmet off. It's like make it a big one, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Well,
technically that's the first time, because the point that was made by IG 11, I'm not a living being. This is the first time any living being is seen without his helmet on. I thought that could have been more.
I don't know. I think maybe our big momentous mask removal will be, you know, when Grogu finally sees his face. You know, like that to me feels like something they're maybe building towards, and that might not be this season, if depending on how many seasons they go. But I don't know. Chris, what did you think? Like, did anything hit you from that scene specifically?
I'm just waiting for Grogu to put on the Mandalorian armor is mainly what it's... No, I agree with all the sentiment here. I think it was mainly like they built it up, they had the car ride, and then all of a sudden he just takes it off because of like a technical thing. And then to have the scene just be like a long computer scan. I love that he tried it without removing the mask at first.
Yeah.
It was like, well, I don't know, maybe he's lying. I'll see what it does. And then it went, and then it started like counting down. What happens at the end of that countdown? So anyone that walks by the machine is just constantly counting down. But yeah, I don't think it was as big as the buildup as the last season was.
I thought it was interesting. The scan was interesting because it was it felt like such an invasion. Because he's like obsessed with, you know, his belief is that no one should be able to see his face, and now the Empire has it like in a database.
Yeah.
It's like how we all feel about facial recognition, except not really, because like who cares? But but it was this like thing where immediately like for him to take it off and then for something to scan his face and be like, we have that on file.
Yeah.
Star Wars operates with like 1970s networking logic, though. Mm-hmm. Like that's like one of the conceits of Star Wars is that like that's how Rogue One works. That's how like that's just in their world they never got Wi-Fi.
Yeah, it was very funny that it was like it needs to scan your face, but it's not going to put it against anything. You know, like it's not like to see if you're with them. It's literally just it needs to scan a face.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like you're not in the system.
If they'd gone anywhere beyond just like the mess hall, you'd see that all the stormtroopers are still playing LAN parties. When they game, they don't have good Wi-Fi. I'm curious so now we know. So now, you know, Mando apparently on that stick, he was confident he got the location of the ship, which I don't know how it happened. But they have Gideon's location. So what are we thinking next week? What are our predictions?
Well, Sam, I would say it's kind of like The Queen's Gambit on Netflix. You don't really need to see the chess moves to get the drama of the situation. You know what I mean?
Sure.
As long as they're getting you to point B, that's all right. I mean, and when he sent that hologram, clearly he's got the right ship, so he must know where he's going.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'd hate more than what they did was that if they spent 15 minutes explaining how they were tracking the ship.
I loved at the end of it when Cara Dune asked, "Did you get it?" Like after they blew up the base and like had that daring rescue, they didn't mention getting it that whole time until they were settled.
Also, but like the whole thing of the episode, sorry, let's just go back. The whole thing was they were like, I need somebody who can access the terminal.
Oh yeah,
to get the data, and then he like wusses out, and then they didn't need him.
Well, to be fair, he did need him if he would never break his Mandalorian code. So technically, he thought.
I just mean, like, was that Bill Burr's little like USB drive? Is that what he needed?
No, they needed him because he the reason they give, which they kind of yada yada, is that it's that he knows Imperial protocols and like could get them to the base,
like Finn, and then like Finn and Starkiller Base.
Say that again.
Like Finn and Starkiller Base.
Yeah, like it was like you'll know what to do when we get there, which is true. And then the hiccup that they run into is that he served under that general.
Got it.
So
okay.
I think dramatically it checks out, where it's like, you know, they had the mission and then that was like their obstacle.
Yeah. Look, I'm glad that speaking dramatically, I am glad that it was Din. I'm glad he had to take off the helmet.
Of course,
like, it all worked better.
Sweaty.
I'm just like laughing at like, man, they really like they set up like you're here for a specific reason. But actually, we're just gonna have the main guy do it because he's the lead.
How did we feel about? I mean, well, so Sam, I think we should start talking about what our predictions are. But there's like two little things. One, we saw no Baby Yoda in this episode, which is probably the first time, or no Grogu, first time since what, Chapter 1?
We see his arm we do see him in Chapter 1. So this may be the first. Yeah, I think this is the first episode we don't see him at all.
Which is a bold move by the Mandalorian to not have.
America might turn on them.
I know. I think they're going to lose a lot of Disney Plus subscribers here. You know, no one's amped up about anything else but Baby Yoda. Grogu.
I heard the puppeteers had carpal tunnel. They
needed the break. But I wanted to. Two other things stood out to me. Going back to the Bill Burr side of things, did anyone just think we needed a moment right when he sees Boba Fett and he's like, "Oh, I thought you were somebody else," and then Mando shows up? I really felt like we needed some sort of like, shit, you know, just some more Bill Burr R-rated version, or at least that would have been the reaction I expected from him. I don't know if we needed it. It's just what I expected.
Yeah, I do like how they establish how afraid of Mando he is.
Yeah.
I like that too, because I think the thing I was dreading about this was that we were going to get into like a big like war of like, this guy screwed me over, like I'll never help him, and like that he was going to still be like a tough guy. But again, that speaks to, I think, Ryan, when you were talking about his pathos, and I was saying that I think it's lent to by virtue of him being low status. Like that is what worked for me about his performance this week, was like, again, the fact that it was just like, not only did he get beat and screwed over by Mando last season, but it's like he learned and now he's scared of him, and he's like, yeah, I'll help him, and he kind of begrudgingly found some respect for him this week, you know? And
Burr,
I liked it.
Bill Burr, I think, as an actor, is especially good at playing, and I do acknowledge that last week I said that he was distracting, and I still do think that, but I think he was very good too. He's very good at playing a person who has like resigned to whatever station in life they have come to. Where he's like, I can like philosophize my way into being okay with this. And I think that he constantly kind of does that in real time. You know, like when he's in prison, they're showing him and he's like, this is bad, but it's like, I'm here, you know? And then when he's talking about being like, about the, you know, being with the Empire, the New Republic, he's just kind of like, this is like kind of where I'm at. Like, it's like, it is what it is kind of thing. And I think he is good at doing that and kind of like showing a character who isn't dead inside. He's just literally like, listen, like, this is how I get by. This is, you know, what he says, like, this is how I sleep at night. Like, this is my philosophy. And I think that he did that successfully in this episode.
I want to ask kind of the positioning of the character. And I think there are times where people react like, oh, you know, they just cast him as a racist and had him say a racist line in the show where he says, oh, well, you people, Mandalorians.
Yeah, I guess that was very on brand.
How did everybody feel about that? And meaning, you think about Rick Famuyiwa wrote this episode, and you're almost playing that character to be, in some ways, a bigot, but that's almost part of it's part of a worthy story of how you represent and deal with people like that, or how they should be depicted. I was curious how everybody felt.
I didn't get the joke. Like I get what you're. I'm not stupid.
I don't know if it was a joke.
I knew. I recognized the. I recognized the lexicography, like the language,
like the structure of what
like,
he's saying.
I recognized that, but I was like,
the mapping.
It was a beat that. I was neutral on it, Mike, because I couldn't make heads or tails of it, and I was just like, I don't know what that means. Like, Mandalorians, as far as I know, are like, you know, what in sci-fi you call like a Terran species, like a humanoid. You know, like I'm just like, they're just people who have like a creed or whatever. Like I don't get it. So, but it was weird. It definitely it stood out to me as a line because I was like, what?
It was strange because I would guess that if you talk to anyone who knows Bill Burr personally, they would say something, a very Hollywoody thing, but they would say something like he's actually the sweetest guy who's like, you know, like whatever. Like they would say like he's not like who his persona is, you know, and which you would guess just because people like to keep working with him or whatever. But it's also one of those things where it's like we as the audience are not privy to that information. So it's like when you're playing off of this kind of like racially charged persona of Bill Burr, it comes off as like this strange like whatevering of what may be considered like a problematic aspect of his persona, which I understand is something I'm applying, but it's like a weird thing to do, like where it's like him saying like, yes, and I do mean like, I do mean all Mandalorians. What? Like that kind of thing. And it's like, you're playing off of this thing that like he may do in his comedy act that is actually problematic, but you're like making a joke about it. And then you're also like breaking the fourth wall. So it's this very strange.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah. I don't know. It was odd to me.
Yeah, it's like I get that. It did pull me out because then that's basically like Bill Burr fan service is what's happening there, because it's like, oh, he was popular last season, so now they're gonna throw him into this new episode, and then like it's kind of when shows self-realize. Like we saw a little bit of that with like the Grogu's like eating fun things and stuff like that. I think they just got a little self-realized in that moment, and they just like, hey, yeah, people like Bill Burr, like let's have him be a little more loose and like less like the character and more like Bill Burr in this scene.
Yeah, it's like if Dennis Leary was on and at some point he was like, what do you want me to say? I'm a moof milker. You know,
well,
like it'd be like, well, that's like his thing.
But it's interesting to me because it's just, you think of the way of Rick Famuyiwa writing this episode, and did he just let Bill Burr do a Bill Burr thing, or was he using it to paint this character in a certain light that when you look at him saying, hey, we're all the same, well, it's actually, no, you already are acting like you're not all the same, that everyone's not the same. And so but in the end, it's not like we learned that his perspective or point of view was in fact wrong. So maybe it is just more of letting Bill Burr do a Bill Burr thing because it didn't actually come into matter in the story.
Yeah, I think that his his kind of philosophy that he spews, though, like I'm hoping within the world of Star Wars it's supposed to be seen this way too, isn't actually very interesting at all. It's kind of just listening to like a stoned freshman who listens to Joe Rogan and thinks that what they're saying is interesting and insightful, but it's not. Like it's well, it depends on how the difference is like how we feel about it versus how the show feels about it, right?
Yeah.
Like, does the show, are they trying to present him as presenting an interesting idea, or are they trying to present someone within the world of Star Wars that doesn't really have an interesting idea but thinks they do? Mm-hmm. You know, like he's just kind of like saying like, this is what I kind of have to believe, but at the same time it's kind of just smoke. Like it's the same thing of like someone being like, I'm an English major and I actually think that like everything's meaningless, and it's like, oh, cool. Like,
yeah, but it's
right.
kind of it could have not been smoke if you would have come back and said, shown him to be wrong, and
shown
they didn't
him to be wrong,
episode.
or shown him to the other characters to be right. Like if someone had some kind of like change of heart, you mean?
Yeah, or if we saw that Mando or that Din was beyond that. You know, that you presented this possibility that Mando is just the same as everyone else. And I guess him taking off his mask is sort of that because he was willing to sacrifice something. I think you could make that connection, but it didn't seem so clear that it was like, oh, yes, this is a repudiation of what that character just said.
Yeah, and also Mayfeld being like, here, I didn't see your face. Like, his like this kind of slight acknowledgement that he's like, I don't believe what you believe, but like I respect that you believe what you believe.
Yeah.
Sure. But I don't think it was like, for the amount of time that was given to that conversation, I don't think enough was given to that moment.
No, I think it's just an anachronistic joke they threw in.
I think we thought about it more than they did, probably.
For sure.
At this point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well,
but it's like it's like what I was saying about the pirates. It's like that may not be how they meant it, but that is the text.
That's true. Yeah, and I didn't mean to dismiss. Like, I think this.
No.
I didn't mean to laugh this off. Like, I've just said, like, maybe they should have thought about it more before they.
Yeah, it was like a throwaway thing that
right,
wasn't so throwaway, really.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's a cultural context to what he said, which is like. It was in the lexicon of racism.
So predictions.
Right. Well, so before that, though, I do want to say, and we don't have to get into it, Sam. Sam, you're trying to end this up. I know you got places to go. Has Boba Fett's armor ever looked this crisp? He's got a nice fresh paint job.
It looked worse
nice.
newly painted.
He had some buckets of paint.
That too.
I hated it. I thought it looked gross like that.
I don't know. I kind of liked it.
I thought it was cool that last week like his armor had worn down further from where we'd seen it before, and that you could see that like underneath the green and yellow paint was his father's armor. Like they implied that it was his dad's armor, Django's armor.
Right.
And I was like, oh, that's why there's like more silver showing. That's cool. And then this week they were just like, yeah, but what if he had like a little like spray section on his on Slave One for repainting your armor?
You know,
Ryan, you got to put a clear coat on that. I hope
you got to get that clear coat.
You want to put a nice shellac. You need that shellac.
Ryan,
I think it's also fair to mention to our listeners that speaking of 1970s networking, Chris is operating under like a 2 to 5 second delay. So if I have off comments coming in over people speaking, there's a technical error here. I'm apparently using the face scanner technology. So just warning to our listeners.
Predictions. Sam, I held you away from it for about 20 minutes. Let's get that prediction.
I think that... So we're we're going to storm Gideon's ship. I think we're going to see... No, I think that's going to be next season. I think we're not going to see a Jedi again. And I think we're going to see Din lose his armor to get Grogu back. And I don't think it's going to be a permanent loss, but I think he's going to either sacrifice, lose, or give up his armor to get Grogu.
I like it. That's a good one. Chris,
that's nice.
what's your prediction?
My prediction is that Moff Gideon and their Star Cruiser, which they've now kind of made a character out of, that's going to blow up. Moff Gideon is going to die, and we're going to see the first reveal of Thrawn.
Ooh, that's a hot and fresh.
Setting up for the Ahsoka series.
That's a big hot and fresh.
Ryan, what do you got?
I think that he's going to take off his helmet in an act of desperation to try to get Grogu back. I think that the season's going to end with him not getting Grogu back. I think they're going to fail in their mission.
Wow.
Oh,
and then
man.
next season's going to be a big chase of getting that little baby boy back.
That would devastate me.
I think that Boba Fett will be standing over some kind of engine pit and unceremoniously fall in. And then in 40 years, that generation will have to deal with his ass coming back.
What if Din turns around with the Beskar spear and hits him in the rocket pack and he goes flying off again?
And then he makes a sound like we've never heard any of the characters make before.
It's funny. Everybody's so mad that he unceremoniously fell into the Sarlacc pit. Oh my goodness, we love him so much. Oh my God, we have to see more of him. And now, people say things like, "Hey, Fett, can you drive the ship now?" That's so great. I do want to say I hope we see another one of those EMP blasts that we saw that was in Attack of the Clones that I love. Me and Chris love the sound effect of so much.
Oh, that was good feelings.
Yeah, that was great. And yeah, I think it is going to end with I think they're not going to get Grogu back. I think that we're going to be propelled into the next season with we got to really get him. We failed.
Is the interior of Slave One like on a gyro? Because I know that like they showed.
I was trying to do the math on that.
They
and
showed
I did not
him
get where the
taking
windows
off,
were.
and obviously he's like in a position when from takeoff where he's like sitting like an astronaut
He's almost
would be
upside down
on his back. But we see later that there's a bunch of like regular chairs behind him. So I'm like, is everybody like strapped in sideways?
I was trying to do the math when they were taking off where the window was, where they were compared to him. I could not figure it out.
But they have detailed breakdowns of every ship in Star Wars, so somebody consulted that when they built out the digital version of this set. Somebody must have.
When they built
someone has the answer, but it wasn't the audience.
Yeah. Well, Pablo Hidalgo writes those books and creates those full breakdown 3Ds of how these ships look. So
I'll take a look through the archives.
Maybe we could get him on the podcast. Mike, what's your prediction?
So I'm going to take a real hot and fresh here, Chris, just for you. Boba Fett dies. They get Grogu.
No.
And as they are on whatever planet, after Grogu has been returned safely, we see the black hooded figure of Sebastian Stan as Luke Skywalker.
Whoa.
Oh, boy. Interesting.
That's cool.
I'm not saying that he becomes a regular in the series. I'm
Yeah.
just saying there's really only 2 other Jedis other than Ahsoka who could have answered the call that we know of, Ezra and Luke Skywalker. And I think
Wow.
they're saving Ezra for the Ahsoka series.
Yep.
I think we see Sebastian Stan. I don't love the idea of more Skywalker-ness, but if he's going to drop in for just a brief moment and impart some wisdom, I think it could be cool. I think it could also be very, very dangerous for them to have another person play Luke Skywalker.
Dangerous
I
for
think-
them and their voicemails.
I hope it's Mark Hamill.
Well, I was going to say I don't think it could be Sebastian Stan because I don't remember Mark Hamill having a public breakdown about 9 months ago.
Wait, what? Am I missing something? Did he have a public breakdown?
Well, if they recast Luke
I just think
Skywalker,
he
you don't
would.
think we hear from Mark
I
Hamill
see
about
what You're
it?
saying. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
I've seen some. There is some fun speculative like fan art where they've like people have made Sebastian Stan into a Luke Skywalker, and it looks cool. I just, man, I'm with what you said there, Mike. I hope they don't bring Skywalker anywhere near this series.
Yeah, it's a hot and fresh for you, Sam. And we've talked now for an hour, and none of us have talked about the fact that Anakin Skywalker, Hayden Christensen, is coming back in the Obi-Wan series, which is just insane.
You do
Well, you
also
told
know
us we couldn't talk about that.
you also know who's still alive. The Leia. They did the kind of the de-aging technology on Leia.
Oh, that's a good point. I forgot about the fact. Well, I
we
guess
still
I forgot about it.
Well, Alderaan's been blown up, so Jimmy Smits isn't hanging out anymore.
No Jedi anyway.
He's in all
but
the wrong
but
places.
he likes to show up in places. You know what I mean?
He should just show up.
Jimmy Smits like to show up.
My hot and fresh is, like a lot of hot and fresh on this podcast, it's not really based in reality. I don't think they're bringing Sebastian Stan in to play Luke Skywalker. I just thought it might be a fun way for them to go. And I agree, probably more so, that I don't think we'll see a Jedi at the end of this season. But if they did, it's Luke Skywalker, Sebastian Stan.
All right.
I think that pretty much does
I
it.
think Han Solo holding a lightsaber shows up. Alden Ehrenreich as Han Solo shows up holding a lightsaber and says, "Joke's on you, I was a Jedi the whole time." That'd be wild, huh?
It's kind of a bit disheartening. They're like, well, we need to fill out Disney Plus with as much more content as possible, and we're not going back to the Solo. Well, oh, too bad for Solo 2. Right, Chris? We're not getting that Solo 2?
Let's make it happen. I was a little sad to hear that. But you know what? Lando's a good gateway there, so we'll see.
It really is. I hope that it's Donald Glover. All right, we're going to have another podcast where we talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, Solo 2 is essentially Lando.
They're taking the Lando series. The best part of that movie is Lando, and they're going to use that as a gateway to get us to one of the worst things about that movie, which was
Hey.
No, he was good. He was good.
Disagree.
I'm just kidding.
Hey.
Disagree.
Woody Harrelson was the worst thing about that movie.
Hey.
I'll take the Favreau's as the worst
I'll take
part of that
Favreau's
movie.
voice being like, "I'm going to go to a cantina warm somewhere. Hey, baby."
You know what my favorite was? Clint Howard.
There you go. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Droids. Guys, can't wait to talk about the finale next week. I mean, Sam, you set it up. After we watch the finale, we're all going to watch every episode of Clone Wars, do an episode per episode of Clone Wars. So we've got, what is it? That would be
That's
like something
7
like
years.
100 and some odd episodes that we're going to do. Does that sound
we
good?
might
to
do
everybody?
we might do the arcs. We might do an episode per arc.
We're not going to have Star Wars for 3 years. I mean, except for the Mando at the end of next year. But we're not going to have any new Star Wars for 3 years, really. So why not?
Yeah, we're
Well.
going to do an episode per episode.
All right.
And then we're finally going to do our rankings of all of the episodes of Clone Wars.
That will do it for this week's edition of the Droids You're Looking For, a Star Wars podcast. Join us next week for the finale of The Mandalorian Season 2. And we'll see you here also for another episode about Disney Investor Day and those 10 Star Wars series. Come back, check with us soon. This has been the Droids.
What they throw? Annie? Sounds like somebody dropped a seismic charge on my internet connection.
We're also going to do an Investor Day episode about Disney's investing in cricket streaming, right?
Oh, yeah.